freaking transient assholes. That's perfect.
Good morning. I'm Keith Belzer. You're going to hear a lot of faculty throughout the 2 weeks talking about very similar ideas and very similar themes, if you will. A lot of what I'm going to say is going to be similar to what Tony talked about. A lot of what you hear this afternoon from Dr. Sunwolf and from Lori are going to reiterate a lot of the same ideas. We've all been talking about this stuff for years. My goal this morning in talking to you about communication is to do two things. Number one, to have you walk away with some very practical things that you can do in a courtroom to make your communication more effective so that you're more persuasive. Number two, to provide some ideas that hopefully you'll take away from here and let percolate. So if I start talking about some things that seem awfully sort of esoteric or theoretic, don't feel like you have to totally grasp my mind today. It's a scary place to go, I promise you. But some of it, down the road you might think, that thing that Belzer said a couple of years ago makes more sense to me now. So this is our jury. It's sort of frightening. Let's talk about how we can communicate with them. This, of course, who knows who this is? Not faculty. Anybody besides faculty? Clarence Darrow, of course. Clarence Darrow. 3 steps to successful jury communication is what I want to reference today. And of course, everything is in threes, right? Everything's in threes. Tony said that before. Number 1, preparation. How many people think when you see a really good lawyer try a case that somehow they're more talented or things come easy? If you've ever thought this, they're more talented, it comes easier for these other lawyers, right? We've all thought that at some point. What I will tell you is that the easier a trial looks, the more preparation went into it. I promise you that. And anybody who's in the back will tell you the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean that experience doesn't help, that learning these techniques doesn't help, but it's preparation. It's not magic. You don't just show up and all of a sudden start making stuff up. It really is. It's a lot of preparation. I just finished a 4-week trial where I did a 1.5-day direct examination with a man accused of shooting both of his parents in the back of the head for a multi-million-dollar inheritance. For each hour that we spent on direct in the courtroom, we probably spent around 15 hours in preparation. And you can start to put together how many hours of preparation that took to get him ready to testify. Number 2, authenticity. And I'm going to tell you, I violated my own rule, or our rule, of primacy and recency by putting authenticity number 2. It made the most sense in the order, but to me, there's nothing more important than authenticity. If we walk into a courtroom and a jury for a moment thinks we're a game player, we're slick, we're used car salespeople, we're lost. It doesn't matter how good a lawyer you are, we're lost. Authenticity, to me, everything else comes out of that. And Tony said that, of course, we all know primacy and recency. My experience recently is that a lot of people who are fairly new to the profession don't know primacy and recency or haven't been talked to about that before. How many people have heard primacy and recency before? All right. Now, there's some hands that are not up, and that's been my experience. What it means is this. The way the mind works with regard to memory, we remember more clearly the first thing we hear and the last thing we hear. So when we're ordering things for persuasive purposes, for communication purposes, we want to order based on importance. What is the most important thing we want to hear and the second most? You want to bookend those two things. And that has to do with each part of the trial and the trial itself. So that's why you don't ever, and Jeff is going to talk a lot about this, get up in the opening and start talking about all kinds of bullshit that has nothing to do with something important to the case, right? Primacy and recency. And finally, you have to be interested. I mean, there may have been a time, many years ago, where a person could get up and just be a talking head for hours on end. I've read some of the accounts of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. I'm going to tell you, some of it was not all that exciting. And they went on for hours and hours and hours. Now, those two people were awfully good orators, so I think they probably added to what's on the written page. But that's not our generation anymore. Any Dick Van Dyke fans? Dick Van Dyke Show? Greatest thing. I found out right away Michelle Obama and I have something in common. It was her favorite sitcom too, Dick Van Dyke Show. Who knows? Dick Van Dyke Show, if you go back and look at it, you'll see there'll be 7, 8 minutes with one camera stationary filming what's going on. It's like watching a play. MTV changed all that. Cuts now are anywhere from like 10 to 13 seconds from camera to camera to camera. This has changed the way we view things. Technology has changed the way we view things. We look at screens where things are happening all the time. We're looking at a screen, using our phone, talking to someone else at the same time. We have to do things that are interesting, or we're going to lose them, and if we're losing them, they're not going to remember anything. So we're going to talk about these 3 things. We'll start with preparation. Preparation, in my mind, takes place in how many ways? 3 ways, right? Right? Exactly. Sometimes you'll see faculty members who go to great lengths through a lot of sort of frustration trying to figure out, how can I make my 5 points into 3? Because I got to make it into 3. So the first step is intense devotion to the craft. And by the craft, I mean trial work. Intense devotion to the craft, meaning obsessive. Go watch trials. Learn about stuff. Watch other people. Think about it. Contemplate it. Outside of the context of a specific case. I learn as much by watching lawyers who are struggling a little bit as I do by watching really good lawyers, because then I'm seeing what's not working. Anytime I'm at the courthouse, if there's a trial going on, I'm going to step in for a half hour. To me, it's incredibly time well spent watching trials. I mean, I think about this stuff all the time. And along those lines, if you want to read some really good material about trial work in general, voir dire work in particular, Dr. Sunwolf, who Tony mentioned earlier, has some books for sale, and she's got one coming out later this year, right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. You're welcome. I highly recommend them. There's amazing stuff. You're really going to enjoy her talk this afternoon. The other book that I would recommend, and it's in, I think there's a storytelling outline that I've done in the materials you have, but if not, it's a book by a guy by the name of Christopher Vogel, and it's about screenwriting. And from my point of view, the way I look at trials, it's the best book on trial practice. Vogel, Christopher first name, and I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but if you look up his name, you'll find it. And it's currently the cookbook in Hollywood about how to write a screenplay. Intense devotion to the client. Tony talked about that to some extent. Lori's going to talk about it this afternoon. Client-centered representation. Who's heard that term before? Client-centered representation. It's fairly recent. I can promise you that when many of us started teaching here, that was not a term that was used very often, if at all. The whole idea is about connection to the client. And part of the preparation is that, is spending time with the client. And that's true, by the way, whether you're going to put the client on to testify or not. I'm a big proponent of putting a client on to testify. Other people disagree with me. I know there's a couple people in this room who adamantly refuse to put a client on under any circumstance. Yes, that's who I was thinking of, someone. I am the opposite. I start with the assumption the client's going to testify, and for no other reason. It really forces me to develop a close relationship, which I think permeates then every single thing I do in the courtroom. And then intense devotion to the case at hand. The way that we make it look seamless, make it look effortless, is that we know the facts of the case better than anybody else in the room. And that really is where you have to get. One of the things that I thought about saying last night when we were all introduced to you is this. Trial lawyers are known for playing hard. I know that's a shock. That might explain why we have like the highest rate of alcoholism and of any profession except maybe dentists. That's true. It's true. Dentists have the worst rate of divorce. And highest rate of divorce. Yeah. But I would encourage you all and challenge you all to really prepare these 2 weeks. I mean, you don't have a real case, quote unquote. But the more you prepare, the more you'll get out of this. I mean, the more we can do to help you and have you try different things if you really know the case. And that way, we can work better together. But when you're trying a case, really you have to know the facts. You have to obsess on them. They have to become second nature. There's a saying, the more you sweat in practice, the less you bleed in battle. Anybody know who this is? Jeff?
I have a hard time seeing it.
Yeah, it's not a very good picture. It's DJ Spooky. right? Sorry, it's cut off on the end there a little bit. Yeah, I heard him interviewed on public radio, and Jeff is thinking, well, of course, where else would you have heard of DJ Spooky Nose? He said, you're only as good as your record collection. And I thought that statement was amazing. And what I think he was talking about is you're only as good as the people who came before you and what you can take from them, right? What you can learn from them. These 2 weeks, steal everything you can, thought-wise. Don't take the furniture, don't take other things. Thought-wise, technique-wise. All of us on the faculty, we take from each other all the time and we give to each other all the time, knowingly, willingly, and with love. Take this stuff. I mean, it's really good stuff. It's what you're supposed to do. Here's a quote from me. Amateurs borrow, professionals steal. Innovators borrow, steal, and improve upon. So take the pieces during these 2 weeks that make sense to you, improve upon them, make them your own. That's part of the preparation too. It's the records that have come before. Authenticities. There's something called moral authority. The first time I heard anybody talk about this was a guy by the name of Stephen Covey. Some of you maybe have read some of his stuff. He wrote the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's not a bad book. He's got some other books on business leadership that I think are even better. For our purposes, he talks about something called moral authority versus formal authority. Formal authority is somebody who has authority by virtue of their position. A boss, a parent, perhaps a lawyer to a client, right? Moral authority comes from living a righteous life. And by righteous, I by no means mean a religious sort of righteousness, although that could be part of it, I suppose. What I mean is living a life with integrity and character. And that's really what we have to project, what we have to be. You can't project it, you can't fake it. We have to be in the courtroom at all times. It's being a true believer. It's being committed to the truth of the innocence of our client. I'm a big proponent of walking in, believing in innocence, right? Sometimes it takes a little stretch to get to that place, but it will manifest itself in many ways if you don't get there, I promise. We really, unless you've been to years of conservatory for acting, we really can't fake this stuff. We, for thousands of years, have evolved to know bullshit when we see it, because if we don't know bullshit when we see it, we're in danger, right? The women here know what I'm really talking about, right? But for all of us, we know when somebody's being a used car salesperson. We know when somebody's bullshitting us when they don't have moral authority. Jurors get that too. If you walk into a courtroom thinking this person is guilty of sin, you're going to convey that because of all the different ways that we give off nonverbal communication, whether it's the voice, whether it's the eyes, the body. We really have to invest, raise the stakes on that moral authority that comes only from a true belief in the client. You have to find your own voice. You're going to see a lot of voices up here throughout the week, and then you're going to see 7 other voices in your small group for 2 weeks. In another lifetime before I went to law school, I dabbled in theater a little bit, and I used to write screenplays. And when I started off, I was a big fan of 2 writers, Harold Pinter, who, if any of you know Harold Pinter, a lot of pauses, very sort of stylized writing, and David Mamet, which had a lot of swearing. So I sort of still did pauses with swearing. A lot of fuck, pause, damn, pause. Minimalist writing, really. But it was before I could find my own voice that I was fooling around with other voices to find out what my voice was. Play around with other voices. Try on different things you see other people do, but ultimately, what we're reaching for, what any artist is reaching for, and this is artist work, it really is. What any artist is reaching for is finding something that is true to you. True to you. Welcome vulnerability. You heard, whole faculty get up here last night and talk about wetting their pants. I've never seen so many afraid people in my life. Right? But it's all true. A friend of mine, Joe Guastafaro, from Chicago, former actor, trial consultant, first told me about this. He said, look, every lawyer has butterflies. That's all right. You just want to get them to fly in formation. And that's what we're talking about. You take that fear, or at least what starts out as fear, of representing an innocent person, of wanting to go to battle for them like a knight. y'all know where the word attorney came from? It came from at-torney. In the old days, when the nobles would have a dispute, they would have a knight who would fight for them at battle, right? The knights would joust, or they'd fight hand-to-hand combat. The belief was that God would support whoever had the righteous cause. And so you would hire somebody to go at-torney for you, and that would be that knight, and that's where the word attorney came from. Pretty nice, isn't it? So, it's okay to be a little bit afraid. What we want to do is then refocus that on intentionality and connection, emotion, feelings, as Tony talked about. The vulnerable part is partly physical. We give off an awful lot of information by what we're doing with our bodies, right? And we all have this issue, like, what do I do with these things? Beginning actors have that same issue. They don't know what to do with their hands. And it's because they haven't truly integrated themselves into a character yet. When we're in court and we're worried about these, we haven't fully integrated ourselves into the character of the protector, of the persuader, of the person who has nothing more in mind other than to convey to you, right in this moment, the innocence of my person. And then maybe do the same thing to you. And see, then these things will take care of themselves, because the focus of my intentionality is where it should be, which is right here, right? It's okay to open this stuff up, though. What it's not okay to do is to be doing this stuff. You know, that all comes from the fight or flight mechanism. We can't, as far as I know, go up and punch an officer in the face during pros. Not literally, anyway. Metaphorically, maybe. We can't go up and slap a juror who's looking at us like they don't believe anything we're saying. So, because we can't beat anybody up physically, sometimes we feel like we want to flee or at least protect our vital organs, so we do all this stuff, depending on what you think is more vital. Remember what Michael said when he was introducing Tony. At the end of the trial, Tony wants to make sure that the jurors look at him and don't see a lawyer anymore. They want to see somebody who's a person. I can't tell you how important that is. I think persecutors can... Are there any recovering persecutors in here? Sorry. I'm sorry. You? Oh my God.
I got fired.
Okay. Very good, very good. I think a prosecutor can get away with being a lawyer. I don't think we can. We need to be people that are persuading because we believe in this person. This is not a client, this is somebody we care about. So we want to remove that distance that's created by talking lawyerese, by talking about exiting vehicles, by somehow suggesting that we are superior to anybody else in that courtroom. I love jurors. I mean, I do. Individual jurors, every now and again, I could, run over with a car. But generally speaking, I love jurors because it's what it's all about. I mean, imagine if we didn't have a jury system. I mean, the cases that we win, forget it. I tried one bench trial in my entire career, and there's a reason it was only one bench trial in my entire career. We have to talk like real people. We have to connect with jurors, person to person, one at a time. That's another misnomer, I think, that we have as far as communication. We're all told, of course, you have to make eye contact with the jury, right? Everyone's heard that before? Too often, though, I'm going to date myself. Anybody remember Arnold Schwarzenegger before he was the ex-governor, before he was the governor? He was in a movie called Terminator, right? Classic. Classic in cinema history. In the first Terminator, he was a bad guy. He played a robot of sorts, and basically walked around the whole movie doing this all the time, looking for somebody to shoot, right? All too often, I think that's what we're doing in front of a jury. We've got a jury. Right now, this is my jury, right? Make it 3 rows. And so this is the eye contact. Or, worst case scenario, it's like 6 inches above your head, right? So I'm never really looking at anybody. That's not eye contact. Maybe it's eye contact. What we want, though, is eye connection, right, Andrew? We want eye connection. I want to talk to you right now, and it's just going to be you and I talking, and nothing else matters, right? And then I'm going to talk to you about the same thing, and then maybe I'm going to come down here. You understand what I'm saying, right? Yeah. It's almost impossible for you not to shake your head when I do that, isn't it? Even if I'm not asking you if you understand, it's almost impossible not to shake your head. See, right? It's an automatic response. Even if you fight it, you know you have the urge to do it. I'm looking at you now. I saw you look away now. I'm looking at you. You're my jerk, right? You with me? You with me now? See? it's almost impossible not to respond. Does that mean any of you are agreeing with me? Not necessarily. It does mean, though, there's communication going on, right? It does mean you're listening. I've developed a connection. Now, as long as I haven't been a jackass up to that point, hopefully that connection's a positive thing. That's eye contact, not the other stuff. The other stuff doesn't help. True believer. How many people think that when jurors hear the word attorney, and they're going to be asked to say, list 5 words that come to mind when you hear the word attorney. How many people think compassion is one of those 5? No? Ambulance chaser, right? Right? Snake, right? Snake, unless I need a snake, then I want the best snake. We want to be able to show compassion. The fact scenario Tony had this morning about the robbery, right? The robbery. The one guy, was it you, I think? Did you have the one where the Keystone Cops? No, who had that? Over here. I mean, I like that just because it's sort of funny and it came to mind, so that's good. But when possible, what we want to do is actually be more compassionate. In that case, we don't have to blame anybody other than the uncle. We can feel bad for the people that got killed. We can respect the police. This is different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I grew up in Chicago. Attacking the police is okay, right?
Yeah, because they will torture you.
They will torture you, and they have, right? And there's lawsuits still going on because of police torture. It's okay to attack the police in Chicago. La Crosse, Wisconsin, not so much, right? The police are all related to people in the community. You only attack the police if you have no other avenue. I've only done it once in over 100 trials, and that was because I absolutely had to, and it was the right thing to do, and this guy had it coming. Generally speaking, you don't, though. So I'm not going to attack the police. I may point out stuff that they didn't do without it being an attack, right? Find ways to show that you're a compassionate person, that you're not just up there ambulance chasing, right? That you're there because you believe in this. True passion is related. And then it's about connections, and I think Tony talked a little bit about this too. We want to demonstrate at all times the connection between self and the person we're working with, the person we care about. That connection doesn't occur because all of a sudden I get up to do my opening, and for the first time, during voir dire or doing anything else in front of the jury, for the very first time, I all of a sudden realize there's a client next to me, so I pat his shoulder, right? And then I walk over and do my opening, talk about him for an hour without ever looking back at him. That's not the connection I'm talking about. It doesn't happen by simply touching your client on the shoulder before you get up and talk. It happens because there really is a genuine connection. You then become the conduit between this connection and this connection, and it goes through you to this person. How many people think jurors walk in thinking, boy, that guy must be innocent, because I'm certainly presuming it so. Anybody think that? It doesn't happen that way. How many people think, in most cases, beyond a reasonable doubt matters at all? It doesn't. Jurors walk in wanting to figure out who did what to who and why did they do it. Why are we here? They don't walk in thinking, I'm going to protect that person's rights. If anything, they walk in with a presumption of guilt. You know it and I know it. If it's a child case, there's an absolute presumption of guilt. There's no question in my mind about that. So we have to develop those connections. All right, this is an actor by the name of Alan Arkin, who now does improv workshops. I just read an interview with him in a magazine called Parabola. Anybody read Parabola? It's about mythology and archetypes. It's a really quite wonderful magazine. It's a journal, really. Where he was talking about the process he goes through when he and his wife do these improv workshops. Not necessarily for people who are interested in acting. It could just be people that are going to find it interesting to do that. Martine and I used to do, I think he mentioned yesterday, some improv workshops here with a guy by the name of Don Fiddler, who's very sad and no longer with us. But Don had taken some workshops from Alan Arkin, so I was always curious about this, and I just happened to run into this about a week ago and read it. And he was talking about this, that all the great performances come out of two things. One, focused intention, and that's what I was talking about. Where you have a very specific focus about what you want to accomplish in a particular scene is how he's referencing it. So instead of simply getting up and having dialogue, you know what the stage movement is and all that stuff, you have an intentionality about what you want to accomplish with that line of dialogue or with that short scene. Secondly, you connect it with emotion on top of the intention. Now, it seems to me, and this is one of those things that might be slightly esoteric, and I'm just sort of fooling around with this idea. So if it makes sense to you, wonderful. If it doesn't, you can take a brief nap. It seems to me that that's our work, right? It's focused intentionality. Where we really get afraid sometimes, I think, is when we stand up to do our opening and we're thinking of the whole trial at once. Instead of, what do I want to accomplish with this opening? And break it down even smaller pieces. What do I want to accomplish with the hook that Tony talked to us about? When I get to this theme, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to bring to them? And then what is the emotion that's going to overlie that? Both my emotion, the emotion I have about him or her, and the emotion I want you all to take from the theme, right? When we start to boil it down in those little pieces, it makes much more sense. And then, every moment comes alive. Every single moment of the trial comes alive when you break it down like that. As opposed to thinking of an hour-long cross-examination as an hour-long cross-examination. If we start to think of it as little scenes that we're going to create something in this scene, and then this scene, and then this scene, right? Use primacy and recency. You set up the scene, you hit the scene at the end. We'll hear about cross from Andrea in a couple of days, I think, right? So that's how you get that great performance. And I'm going to tell you, when Arkin talks about this, he talks about even the youngest actors. When they're doing it that way, there's never a dull moment because it's so engaging. You don't get caught up with all the noise. Anybody ever heard the term quiet mind? A couple people. How about being in the zone? Flow experience, aha experience, right? Different names. Anybody here ever play athletics at a fairly high level? By high, I don't mean Division I or pros, but I mean intense level, yes. Did you ever, what sport did you play?
Football.
Did you ever experience that where in a particular game things were in slow motion for a play or a couple of plays?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, tell me about that a little bit.
Played football in college at the Division II level, and
Okay.
one of the most vivid memories I have is where we were the number 3 team in the country. We were playing the number 2 team in the country, and the game just really slowed down. I mean, all the stuff, the years that you put in before that, the clunkiness in that moment, it was just easy, and everything, you saw it ahead of time, you knew what was happening, and it was just like the game slowed down.
It's intoxicating, yes?
Yes.
It's an amazing experience. How about anybody in the arts ever experienced that? Dance, music, theater? Sir, will you please tell me about that a little bit?
I was a jazz guitar player for a
Okay.
while, and every once in a while when you're playing with people, you know exactly what's happening, you know where you're going, and you live in the moment, and that moment is everything. And you know when you look out at people seeing you play, they feel it as well. And it's really an amazing thing. It doesn't happen very often. When it does happen, it's one of the greatest things.
It's spiritual, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy good. It's crazy good when it happens. How many people have experienced something like that in some athletics, performance arts, something, right? So you know what I'm talking about. Every place where there's performance, I've heard people talk about this. Marshall Faulk was a football player a few years back. He won the MVP one year, just had an amazing season as a running back. And he talked about during that season, on almost every play, he would grab the ball and he could tell what every person was going to do 20 yards down the field because he was experiencing exactly what you talked about. Everything was in slow motion. And it came from this incredible focus of quieting the mind of everything else except being in this moment right here, right now. And everything was in slow motion. Michael Jordan used to talk about it in basketball. And for him, it particularly would come alive in the playoffs. You know, not so much in the regular season, because, regular season he could sort of dominate without trying too hard. But in the playoffs, the basket got bigger. It looked much bigger to him in the playoffs because of that focus, that intentionality. The emotion that overlaid it pushed the intensity forward, the emotion of high stakes, right? There's research that I'm aware of from way back in that talks about how an audience affects a performance. For each person, there's a level of preparation upon which if you achieve that level of preparation, the audience makes you better. If you haven't reached that level of preparation, the audience will detract from your performance. where I read the research had to do with tennis players, where they looked at levels of research and then also, or levels of preparation, all of a sudden you get to some point. So for somebody like John McEnroe, who half of you probably don't even know who that is anymore, but when he would play, being on the big stage was perfect for him, right? Where for other people, they would choke. I mean, that's the term for it, they would choke. We all want to get to that level of preparation so that we can then reach that quiet mind moment of having nothing else going on except this moment right now. I will tell you, once you start to experience it, you can, if you know you're prepared enough, begin to call upon it. It's no longer just accidental, right? It's no longer happenstance. You can actually call upon it, get up to do a cross-examination, and say, I'm going there, right? It takes a while, but reach for it, because it changes everything. Because what happens then is it's the same way during a cross. The answer that's coming back to you is in slow motion. You see the entire script of the play in your mind's eye. All the police reports, everything everybody's ever said, you know, all the permeations, all the different things that can occur, what all the different defensive backs are doing, to go back to Marshall Faulk. And then you can take that answer and do with it what you will, because everything's in slow motion. All right, who knows what this is?
Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that the emotion that you're talking about is actually pretty complex.
Yes.
It's not just a jazz musician or football player who at that moment is approaching and trying to persuade a jury.
Right.
I mean, there you're talking about artistry at the moment with the audience. And for our purposes, what we're doing, we are trying to persuade. And so, based on the preparation, you work it up as far as the emotion you have in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Along with that, there is also the separate emotion of the jury in the moment as well,
Absolutely.
which is actually something more than
Yep.
that as well.
And in that way, I think it's similar to when actors reach this place, because that's always about a message you're giving to an audience, while at the same time reaching that level of connection or intention with whatever emotional, the emotion of the character is oftentimes very different from the emotion you want the audience to have. And I think for us, sometimes the emotion that we're feeling, if we thought this through, is not necessarily the same emotion we want the jury to have. It may be similar, it may not. I mean, those are choices we'll make. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. It is complicated or complex, you're right. But really my focus here is to say, it's about, so much of it's about the preparation to know I can just be in this moment because I know everything that's going to happen, and allow yourself to just be that present in that moment. I mean, it's amazing stuff. All right, David, what is this?
Shiro Mifumi and the Seven Samurai.
It's the Seven Samurai. What does that have to do with trial work? First of all, I think it's a great public defender movie, if you're a public defender. I would say that. The legend has it that the samurai warriors were never allowed to pick up a sword until they knew how to dance, they knew how to paint, they knew how to sing, that they had to learn the arts first so that any time a sword was picked up, it was from a heart zone. It was done for a specific purpose. I like to think that's what we're talking about here. We're going to give you the techniques. The techniques are only so effective as in how you tie them to the heart, how you tie them to the cause at hand. When you talk about theory of the case, if your theory of the case is not that the police screwed up, then don't beat up the police. At worst, it might distance the jury, but at best, it's just going to confuse the jury, right? We want to be thinking, why are we going to do what we're going to do? How is it tied to a holistic approach? How's that for a Wisconsin, Chicago boy? A holistic approach to the entire endeavor we're about to undertake. When I have met with people over the years who are public defenders or defense attorneys, if that was a choice that was made, in other words, it wasn't just the first job you happened to get, but if it was a choice, I want to be a public defender, I want to be a defense attorney. Generally speaking, I've seen people fall into one of two categories. They're warriors, right, who frankly just want to fight the government. They don't trust the government, they want to fight the government, they want to go to battle with the government, and if you don't have a client, they call you a terrorist. So, you become a public defender, right? The other group are people who I refer to as empaths, right? They're social workers at heart, who thought for whatever reason they could do more effective work on behalf of people, often poor people, with a law degree instead of a social work degree. Now, The samurai example tells us we need to have both, right? To me, the artistry that they learn first is the empath, it's the connection. It's the me reaching out to you so that we can share commonality, right? This existence we call life. We share that together. The warrior part is the ability to take up the sword and go to battle if you need to. Each of you, I would ask you to take just a moment and identify which of those you fall into. We all have some of both, I hope, right? But try to figure out, where do you fall in that spectrum? Because if I have you this week, it's something we're going to talk about when you're doing your exercises. Those of you who are warriors, I'm going to push you to show a little bit more compassion, a little bit more humanity. It doesn't mean you're not human. It means that that's the mode you've sort of taken, to fight, right? To fight. Fight the good fight. Those of you who are empaths, I'm going to push for a little bit more intensity perhaps at times. You already got the connection now. Stuff that Larry's going to talk about with client interviewing, that's going to make sense to you innately for a lot of you. The warriors, not so much, right? So we're going to work to develop both of those, because the real artist in the courtroom is doing both at all times. All right, we want to be interesting. Story form method. Tony talked a bit about storytelling today. There's a group of us that have been talking about storytelling for years now. I remember when we first introduced it to theories and themes, it became theories, themes, and storytelling. It was sort of cutting edge stuff. I'm sad to report that maybe 15 years later, some of that we've been talking about this stuff, I think. Some 15 years later, a prosecutor finally wrote a book about storytelling for prosecutors. It's a horrible book, by the way. It's very basic. But nonetheless, they've been watching us do this for 15 years. They're starting to pick up on it. A while back, in a conversation with Steve Lindsay, who you're going to see next week, he and I were up having a lot of fun with our buddy Jack Daniels. And we started talking about this idea of storytelling and how we both tried to not use the term storytelling in court. We wanted to say, well, why is that? And it's an obvious answer, right? Why would saying story, I'm going to tell you a story. So it's fiction, right? Sounds fiction. Joseph Campbell will tell us that there's more truth in mythology than there is in anything we think is reality, but we don't really want to have that conversation with the jury. Right? I see lawyers get classy-eyed when I try to have that conversation with them, much less a jury. So, I wanted to talk about this in a way for people so that it didn't seem like it was fiction. In story form is what he and I came up with. And I'm glad to say that once we sobered up, we still thought it was a nice idea. So we've both sort of been talking about it ever since. The idea is we're putting all this information into story form because it's more interesting. It's a narrative. As Tony said, that's how we think about things for the most part, right? Most of us think of things in a narrative. It's how we remember things. Who here thinks they don't have a very good memory about facts? Okay. Do you like movies at all?
Yep.
You do. Have you seen any decent movies recently?
Sure, but I have kids, so.
So you've seen kids' movies. Have you seen any, along the lines of beverage versus adult beverage, have you seen any movies that you liked that weren't for your kids recently?
Sure.
Okay, what can you tell me what it is?
The Town.
The Town. Yeah, good one. Good one. Did you see that when it came out, or did you see it on DVD?
DVD.
So was it fairly recently?
It was within the last 6 months.
Okay. If I asked you, I'm not going to, by the way, but if I asked you to stand up and basically tell us the story of the town, could you do it?
I probably could.
You could. But you don't feel like you have a very good memory, right?
I guess when you say it like that.
Well, right. I mean, and that's the thing with jurors. I mean, Sumwolf's got all this research about how long they can remember things, and I can never keep the numbers straight. I'm not a numbers person. But what we know is all of us can remember a good story. I hated history in high school. I hated history in college. And then I saw this Spielberg movie, Amistad. And I finally, for the first time in my life, truly got what slavery was about. I mean, I understood it intellectually before that. But when I saw that movie, I was like, fuck. It was visceral, and I could tell you that story to this day, and I saw it 15 years ago, right? That's what narrative does. That's what narrative does. We remember this stuff. It reaches us on all kinds of levels. That's why we want to use the story form method. Use of space in the courtroom. This is an open space, an open stage. We can make this anything we want. In Tony's example earlier, if I want to try this case in the opening, if I'm gonna say, see, in my mind, like, the nephew was kidnapped. That was the term that kept going through my head. He points the gun at him to take the money. I think that kid's kidnapped. And that's how I saw it, right? That's the picture I had in my head. If I'm gonna do this case, and the tellers are over here, the kid's over here, the uncle's over here, I'm meth all freaked out, I'm gonna have my kid over here looking at the beef jerky that has Sasquatch? Who's the? Sasquatch, thank you. Have you all seen those commercials? Right, the Sasquatch? No? Messing with Sasquatch, thank you, yes. So I'm gonna have my guy over here looking at beef jerky, thinking about Sasquatch, when all of a sudden the uncle freaks out, shoots the people. But I'm gonna set it up all in the courtroom here, and it's all gonna come alive. I'm gonna talk about what happened here, and then I'm gonna come over here and talk about my guy over here, and then see what happened. And we're all gonna see this, right? I created this space. When I get to do a cross-examination of the donut-eating cops who are over here, right? I'm just going with what Tony said, I'm not asperging cops. I'm gonna do the cross, setting up that exact same space, right? The officer's there. Officer, I want you to imagine for a moment, this is where the beef jerky is, that's where the tellers are, that's where you guys were sitting. I've now reinforced everything I've done in my opening in the cross-examination. If I put my guy in the stand, I'm gonna do the same thing, right? I've created a very real space in the courtroom. The jury then will look at the evidence through the lens of that space. Prosecutor gets up to do redirect, they will step into your space. They will adopt your space as the real space. I've never yet had them not do that, not once. They will adopt your space. And therefore, everything becomes about the story that you're telling in the open that Jeff will talk to you about and throughout the trial. Now, because prosecutors apparently are learning something about storytelling, if they ever do that to you, what you do, and this, you might feel a little cheesy the first time you do it, but if they did the same thing I just did, you get up, you say, look, I want you to wipe this out of your minds, right? Because that's not what happened, right? I mean, if we're really going to talk about this, let's put the police center, right? Figure out what you want to do to change the space, but you have to change it. This simple gesture will erase it from their minds. It's a Jedi mind trick. I swear to God. It's sort of crazy. It's like an improv. I mean, you do that on stage in improv. You're going to do a different scene. You do something to break up the scene you've just created so that you can then create a new space. Yeah, exactly. It's like way too close. All right. Trilogies. Pacing. In the case that, again, we'll use Tony's example. Pacing has to do with rapidity of speech. Not walking back and forth because you're nervous. I guess it means that too. We don't want that. We want movement in the courtroom, purposeful movement. The movement punctuates, it doesn't detract. If you're with me this week, that'll be the first thing I'll do. I'll stop you. I will not let you pace. It just will not happen. I will ask you to move, but you're going to move to punctuate, not to detract. If I am telling this story, whether it be through a direct or an opening, of what my guy was experiencing when his uncle was over there, it might be that I would start off this part, walked over there, he looked at the beef jerky, if you remember that commercial he had seen with something Sasquatch, what is it? Messing with Sasquatch. And I'm talking about this in a sort of slow tone, maybe vocal quality down a bit. And then when I turn here, I can speed it up. He turned around, he saw his uncle. His uncle had a wild-eyed look, had a gun up to someone's head, and the next thing he knew, he saw his uncle shoot the man in the head. You see what we do with pacing there, right? Don't always assume that when something becomes more intense, you speed it up. Sometimes the opposite choice is more effective. Just slow it down. He walked in, he was looking at the Messing with Sasquatch beef jerky, all of a sudden he turned around. His uncle had a gun up to the teller's head. His heart started racing. He didn't know what his uncle was doing. You see, you can do it in the opposite direction too. Same thing with loudness. You can be at one level, and you can bring it down. Right? A lot of times we think the urgency, the intensity, the emergency part of the scene is where we bring it up. Almost always, I think it's better to bring it down because it sucks people in. Silence is our friend. We are horrible at silence. And I think it's related to the fact that we're horrible at listening. To which point somebody here should have said, what? Silence is our friend. Alliteration we heard about, rhyming. I don't do rhyming very well, some lawyers do it really well, it's not really my thing. We can discuss later about why it's not, but it's not. No reading, we don't read, we don't read, we don't read, we don't read, not anything, not any time, for any reason. Reading makes you, it creates a relationship between you and a piece of paper. I don't care about your relationship with a piece of paper. I mean, keep that to yourself, that's a personal issue. What we want is a relationship between you and the audience. You can't get that if you're reading, it's impossible. I also am a strong opponent to memorizing. There are some lawyers I've seen who can memorize an opening and actually do it very well. But this is the thing. Unless you have experience writing dialogue, or in this case a monologue, when you write, you don't account for breathing. You write the way you think. So it will never come off as absolutely natural. It's one of the first things you learn about writing anything that's going to be spoken out loud by characters. You have to account for breathing cadence, or it won't seem natural. That's why sometimes if you see a play and the speech just seems like a written speech, that's probably why. It's not coming off as natural. It's very, very difficult unless you really can write well, memorize well, and act well to do that. And even then, it's not the best thing. If I've memorized my opening, what does it take away from me the opportunity to do?
Connect.
What?
Connect.
Connect, yes, to some extent. Huh? Improvise. Why would I want to improvise? Huh?
Better intention.
Better intention? I can be focused. What if I'm looking at you and you look puzzled about something I've just said? And I've memorized it. Is there anything I'm going to do with that? I'm going to, my butt's going to tighten up, but that's about it. Right? That's about it. There's not a whole heck of a lot else I can do. Right? Where if I haven't memorized, if I'm in this moment and I see somebody who seems to have a question on their face, I can take a moment and just sort of re-explain what I've just said in a different way. That's live, right? That's intentionality. No memorizing. Acting, no acting. Confession, when I first started teaching, I started teaching like 2 years out of law school, because I had this acting background too. And as an actor, I'm a better lawyer. That's why I went to law school. But I thought at first I could teach lawyers how to act in the courtroom, and it really doesn't work. Beginning acting is about, acting is believing. It's one of the first acting books I ever read. It's about believing what you're doing in that moment. That's beginning acting. It's not acting exactly. Believe in what you're doing, but make it interesting. Don't act in court. Most of us really can't act, quote unquote, in court without it coming off as showy or fake, which goes against authenticity. Exactly. Visualize the story when you're going to talk using the storytelling method. Visualize what you're seeing. A lot of Daryl gave me an extra 10 minutes because we got started late due to some technological issues, but I still don't really have time to do this. But let me just tell you, there's something I would do as an example. If I were to ask, are there people here who don't think they're very visual? A certain percentage of you would raise your hands. Inevitably, I could ask one of you to come down here and say, look, you've just been locked up for restraining order reasons, and you need me to go to your living quarters, your residence, to get something that's important to you. And I'll ask you to visualize where it is in your house or your apartment, or wherever the case may be, your van down by the river, to quote Chris Farley. I'll tell you to tell me how to go find them. And as all you watch that person, they would visualize it. They would go in their mind's eye and look to see where they would go in their house. Everybody does the same thing. So we are all able to do it. When we're telling the story, that's what we want to do. So that when I was using Tony's example again, and I walked up here, I was visualizing a convenience store that I am familiar with in Wisconsin, right? Another reason, the first time I ever heard this was from Sumwolf, scene has memory. You have to go to every scene in your case so that you can see it in your mind's eye when you're talking about it. But you need to visualize it, that'll help the storytelling. Tell the story from the inside simply means connect to it. Make it yours, not objective. Create word pictures instead of saying afraid. It's the old, beginning fiction writing, show me, don't tell me. Instead of saying the person was afraid, so the person saw the gun pointed at them, beads of sweat began to roll down their forehead. Is it ungodly hot in here? Or is it just me? Just warm up here? Okay. This beads of sweat, I think, sort of connected me there for a second. They were having trouble breathing, their heart started racing. See, that's the showing instead of the telling. Talk about that. Looping simply means use this in all aspects of trial that's interactive. You take something that was said, you restate it in your next sentence. It could be direct, it could be cross, voir dire. Use all the senses. We all too often just rely on visual. Want to use all the senses. Smell is, they say, the most powerful emotional memory is a sense of smell. So think about ways to bring in smell. For instance, taste. The taste of metallic. Sometimes people taste that when they're really afraid, terrified. Get rid of obstacles. Get away from podiums unless you have to be tethered to a podium. But even then, you want to move as much away from it as you can. Standing up and sitting down is a pet peeve of mine. We don't get up to do an opening by sort of walking up and then just sort of talking while the jury isn't quite focused yet and talking about stuff that doesn't matter. You get up, whether it's the opening, closing, cross, you get up. You claim the space. I mean, that's what I did when I started my talk here today with you. I got up, I waited until everybody was ready. I waited until your gaze came upon me, because then I knew we were in the same space together. We weren't somewhere else. It's the same thing with anything we're going to do in trial. When you finish, it's not, and that's why I hope that you'll maybe use the Constitution and find him not guilty, thank you. And go sit down, because again, you're afraid you're going to wet yourself. Finish like you would if the person who you care about more than anybody else in the world were your client. Now, for some of you, I'm making assumptions that the person you care about more than anyone else in the world is not you, okay? So assuming there is another person, if that person were there and you just finished an opening or closing, would you say thank you as you like slinked away to your chair? You'd say he's innocent. Find himself. And I'd sort of, not in a aggressive way, but I'd sort of dare you to disagree with me, right? We want to finish that moment strong. That's part of the concert. If you ever heard a good symphony play, that silence right after the last note is still part of the concert. The concert's not quite over yet. That silence is part of it, and that's what that is. I was playing around with this in my mind last night about whether these might be inconsistent. How do you reconcile authentic with interesting, right? You got Atticus and Vinny. Because we need to have both. And I think the thing is, you find things that are interesting that work with your sense of authenticity. We don't want to be just my cousin Vinny. I mean, he's funny, he's interesting, there's no doubt. Amazing cross-examination. Best use of an expert I've ever seen with Marissa Tomei. But we also need to have Atticus underneath it all, right? That's the authenticity. So that's what we're trying to do, is to have an authentic voice, but then find ways for us to express through our authentic voice. It doesn't do any good to be really authentic and boring as watching paint dry. Red light, green light, very quickly. Let's just model it, and then we can talk about more in small group. Martine, tell me how you got to the program.
I took a red eye.
Red light on red eye.
It was a Delta flight, oversold, really cramped. I got a seat that has right by an exit row, but there was something sticking out of the exit row, the exit that got in the way of my leg.
Red light on the something sticking out of the exit row.
It was some sort of cover, and it was soft, and it was designed to protect the hard edges of the window so that I wouldn't, the passenger wouldn't be hurt, but it protruded right into my right leg space. So.
Okay. Green light on your trip.
Right, so I got on the red eye, tried to fall asleep, slept on and off, woke up about maybe 6 a.m., we landed about 7 a.m.
All right, stop. It's a simple technique that we're going to be using throughout the week with you that a lot of times we don't dig deeply enough in whatever we're doing, whether it's a direct examination, cross-examination, voir dire. Red light means go deeper with what you just said instead of just touching the surface. Green light means going back to where you're at. There's some bells and whistles that your instructor may talk about now. Color with emotion. So it could be, I could have said to Martine, color with emotion, how you felt about having your leg protruded into. Right? All right. Listening equals communication. We want to demonstrate active listening in the courtroom for all kinds of reasons. It makes us more human, but it also allows us to be better communicators because we're actually hearing what's going on. We're not good listeners, I mentioned that earlier. Marvin Gaye, what's going on? One of the best things that I learned early on in my career is to every now and again in the courtroom just stop, whatever I'm thinking about, and just take in the room. What's going on? In this particular moment, what's going on? What's the prosecutor up to? What's the judge up to? What's my client up to? What's the jury up to? Just take it all in. What's going on? Right? We oftentimes don't take that time, and it's really amazing what you can figure out in the dynamics of the room and then how you can affect them. This is how I see public speaking evolution. How many steps will there be? 3. First, when we first start off doing public speaking, the focus is on ourselves. We're concerned about screwing it up, we're concerned about forgetting something, concerned about that we're not perfect public speakers. Step 2, we move from that, the focus is no longer on ourselves as much as on the material. Now I'm going to focus on the material because this is more important. This is much more important than me being worried about myself. So the material could be the client in this case, right? It could be the cross-examination. The third step that we have to get to, absolutely have to get to, is in fact to focus on the audience. We have to get to the point where what we're really paying attention to is how everything is affecting the audience. Because this is audience-driven, it's jury-driven. Anything we do is irrelevant if it's not persuading the jurors. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Okay, folks, listen up, because I'm gonna tell you how to find the room that you will speak.